if you were doing both of them. So it's basically the in-class one that we're going to do is we did the assessment on Monday. I have another assessment that we're going to do on Friday. And then we're going to talk a little bit about leadership on different styles and things today. So we're going to compare all of that and basically sum it into one kind of 2 or 3 paragraph type of thing based on what we've covered this week. Okay. And that'll be the in-class discussion. So I'm not having you guys do 2 this week because it's a little bit longer than what we would normally do. So so that was intentional in case anybody was actually looking for the outline discussion already. It's intentionally not there. So having said that, we'll be moving right into the chapter on leadership. Now, the aspect of leadership is one of those that you can't, we're just going to barely scratch the surface. Who's management in here? Who's management concentration in here? Okay, you guys will have a whole course in leadership where we talk about all different styles and go into details on how to manage, how those things work. So you'll have that to look forward to. So we're just going to start with kind of a brief overview of those types of things. In leadership style, all these we go through, you may find after we go through these, some of these may really fit you if you think they're going to fit you. Then there's going to be other ones that you go, well, that doesn't really fit. Or maybe you're going to have parts of 2 different styles. Okay. I can say that I probably have parts of 2 different styles that we're going to cover today, possibly even the 3rd. Okay. And a style of leadership is one of those where it's how you are actually going to look at the aspect of leading somebody else. Okay. In other words, how do you think you would actually deal with other people? Okay. So the first one, which is kind of a more modern theory that we're going to look at, is called the Big 5. Okay. Or a level 5 leadership. Okay. This one was really kind of more out of several CEOs, and there was a guy named Jim Collins who kind of decided to study this from a psychological perspective and did a lot of surveying and all those types of things. So what he came up with is this aspect based on the way people are about how effective you are as a leader. Okay? So when you look at this, take a look at this. Okay, he came up with this aspect of looking at it as being 5 different levels of leadership. Okay, and it's basically based on how well you are able to handle and lead other people. So the first level, level 1, is capable. Okay, so we say somebody is capable. What does that mean? You're able, right? You can actually perform the function of management, okay? Or in this case, of leadership. Now, when you're looking at this, right, basically being capable means that you can do the job, which means you've got knowledge, you've got talent, you've got skills, okay? Typically, when you first get into a leadership position, like you're a supervisor somewhere, typically you're going to be really close to the line, right? You're going to be close to that aspect where we talked about a little bit earlier. What's important is going to be the actual talent of that. Okay? Yeah, I took this right out. This is right out of the book, guys. So we'll as we go through it, it is. So the next one is contributing. Okay, so it's going to take that level of being you're a supervisor. Okay, you know how to basically get the job done. Okay, but now you're going to start to contribute, right? So the next level up, to achieve the next level up, you're going to be doing things like in the capable aspect of that would be capable is just basically getting the job done. Contributing means that you're actually going to start thinking about it, right? Contributing means that you're adding something to the value of the equation. You're looking at improvement, okay? you're looking at ways to do the job better. Okay, maybe getting things to be a little bit more efficient. Okay, that moves you to that next step of contributing. You're changing something. Okay, so the first one is just getting the job done. It's kind of like the mechanics, right? You can get the job done. But the next one up, you're going to add something to it. Okay, you're looking at that as being adding something to the equation. You're changing something. Competent, okay, means you get good at it. Okay, so at level 3, that being competent means that basically you have gotten really good at managing your situation or leading your situation. So if you're a manager just starting out, do you think you're really good at what you do? Yeah, some are, some aren't, but typically you're not going to be as good as you can be, right? I used to have this saying, basically, when I looked at applicants, okay, when I looked at hiring people, I looked for people that were who had at least 1 to 2 years experience at any particular job. Why? What happens if you have, what happens to you as an individual if you have a job 3 months? How much did you learn in 3 months? Probably, I would say you might reach the capable level, okay, if you're looking at this scale. Do you think in 3 months you got to the point where you can contribute? Okay, even as a worker, right? Typically, that time frame, studied time and time again, is typically about a year as an individual worker, okay? And to get to that level where you're contributing, you've got to get comfortable with that job. You've got to think about what you're doing, right? You've got to be able to understand that entire position before you can contribute, okay? And then being competent at it means that you're really got to that point where you're contributing a lot, you've been able to move things along, okay? Now you're in that real comfortable level of being really good at it, okay? Now, effective, the next level up, these are people where you start getting into positions such as general management, plant management, okay? And the difference there is between being competent and being effective. Effective means that you're able to foresee change, okay? That you can, that you're going to be able to act and carry yourself in super high standards, okay? You're going to have that dedication to the vision, okay? Anybody work for a manager who didn't believe in what they were doing? I can tell you I have, okay? Definitely, and which means they've never reached that effective level, okay? They're pretty much capped out at competent. Were they good at their job? Yeah. But did they really believe in the vision of the company? Did they really believe in what they were doing? No. I used to call these individuals, these are people that stay in the competent, they're doing a job. And a lot of times I call that punching the clock, okay? When you get to this point here, because the way you look at this is there's a split right here. Right in between the gold and the green. Okay? The bottom 3, you can be really good at your job. You can be a pretty decent manager. You can manage those types of things. But to move yourself into that effective one, you've got to believe in things like vision. You've got to believe in the future. You got to, another term is walk the talk. Okay? And I've worked with a lot of people who don't walk the talk. Okay? They don't actually believe in what they're doing. So these here, this is where you get into this is where the leadership aspect comes in, is these last 2 levels. Okay? Now this last level, level 5, okay? That's where you're talking the really well-oiled machines that are usually CEOs, okay? You get to that level. That's upper level management, okay? Because not only do they walk the talk, they're building excellence. They're building dedication. They believe in what they're doing. They're going to carry the company forward. They're dedicated to what they're doing. When you become a CEO, right? How long do CEOs last? A long time, right? They're believing in what they're doing. They don't change very often. The only thing that causes a CEO to change is a downgraded business, okay? Or some external, typically a lot of times it's external or internal factors that they can't manage the change aspect of it. So most level 5 managers and are typically going to be that CEO level. They're going to be dedicated to that company. They're going to be there a long time. They're going to carry them through it. So does that mean that people can't get there? No. You need to have level 5 leadership at lower levels as well. But basically, it's about a person who really looks at every opportunity to be able to carry that dedication all the way through and incorporate this aspect of the last part of this, which is humility. Okay? Why would humility be an important part of leadership? What's humility? What's the term? To be humble. Like you athletes here, nobody's ever said that, to be humble. Okay? Being humble is really kind of the verb of that where you look at putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Okay? Or understanding another person's position. Okay? So typically in team building, you're going to want to be humble. Because that way you can get the dedication and be able to get that input from a team. Okay? So as we're looking at this, the aspect of humility is kind of, as far as a leadership is concerned, or a leader is concerned, means that leadership is bigger than themselves. Okay? Can you have a leader without followers? Not a rhetorical question. That's a yes or no question. Okay. Can you have a leader without followers? Okay. Could you? Possibly. But typically, if you look at the difference between a manager and a leader? Okay. Do managers have followers? They have people who work for them, right? Okay. But they really don't have followers. The difference is the mindset, okay? The mindset of a manager is to get the job done, right? To be effective. Whereas leadership is about getting and moving forward, right? It's about that people aspect, okay? A leader has to have followers, okay? To be an effective leader, okay? And part of doing that is to become humble. I mean, you don't even have to look at business people to understand this. There's plenty of those out there. Martin Luther King, okay? Very well-known leader. Was he humble? Very humble, right? He looked at the well-being of others over his own sake, okay? And his own concerns, okay? That's what being humble is. Now, are there good leaders that have not been humble? Huh? All the time, right? Okay? What ends up usually happening, and this is where I'll throw this out as an example of being humble or humility, okay? Irregardless what the politics are on either side, okay? You compare Martin Luther King to Adolf Hitler, okay? Adolf Hitler, ruler of Europe for, through World War II, okay? Decided to do conquest and all that stuff. And we use him a lot because he has a lot of characteristics of leadership. But was he humble? Okay, definitely not, right? An egomaniac, okay? Typically, if you look at leaders who are in that category of leading well, but aren't humble, they're not sustainable, okay? In the long term, they're not sustainable. They may be sustainable in the short term, right? Hitler was very successful for about 7 or 8 years, right? Till people got fed up with him, and we dumped him out of power. Okay, the same with the other ones that were in that same aspect, Mussolini and the Emperor in Japan. Okay, those, if you look at those, very successful leaders for a very short period of time, because it doesn't work in a longer period of time. Okay, because you're not humility adds that aspect of being there for a longer period of time. Okay, so when you ask that, being that aspect of being humility really adds into it. So then we look at here, carrying off of that aspect of humility, okay, is this aspect of servant leadership, which is another way. And I can say that probably I practice this based on my personality. I practiced this way before I even knew it was actually a theory. Okay, and that's the belief that you as a leader are there to serve the people who are underneath you. Okay, so what does that really mean? What do you think that means? Think about, and I know servant is probably not a real, it's not typically used in a very positive light, right? Typically, but realistically, it actually is a very, it is a very interesting term, but it suits it well, okay? If you're religious, right, they consider that you serve a particular God, whatever that is, okay? You kind of look at it in that framework, okay? So you're doing something for the benefit of somebody else. Okay, as a servant leader, your whole focus is not your actual well-being or your focus, right? You're not the focus. Everybody you're around that you're leading is the focus. Why is that so important? Put it in athletics. I'll put it in the team perspective. You as an individual, do you win a game as an individual? The team wins the game, right? So does the captain set the tone for that? Okay, he does, right? But typically, if that focus is on the bet of who gets the ball when, okay, and the captain coordinates that to basically make sure that the person gets set up to make that really important play, and even though it may not be him or her, okay, that's the focus of being a servant leader, okay? The focus isn't on them, it's on making everybody else successful, okay? So the whole point of that being you're not looking to make yourself successful, you're looking to make everybody else successful. And in doing so, what happens to you? What's that? You're rewarded as well, right? You're rewarded actually the same way, okay? Typically if a person, I used to have other managers come to me and go, you have a lot of people who are transferred out, who transfer out. I said, yeah, because they got promoted, okay? Because I didn't look at that as negative. I wasn't looking to hang on to them. I was looking for their success, okay? Because it's important for their success to be able to grow. So this aspect of servant leadership is pretty key to me because in essence, I wasn't caring about about my success as much as theirs, okay? And by doing so, it made me successful, okay? Because my whole focus is on them. How hard do you, if I put my focus into the team I was managing, how much do you think they gave back? A whole lot more, right? Because my whole focus was never on me. It was never about me. Okay, it's about them and getting the job done and figuring out a way to get it done. Okay, servant leadership is one of those aspects. It's practiced by several major companies and CEOs. Okay, it's not unusual. It started probably way back when with General Motors and a gentleman called Jack Welch. Okay, who was the CEO for General Motors for probably 25 years. Okay, but his whole culture was centered around this aspect of servant leadership. Okay, so he expected all of his management team to join in and become that aspect of it. Okay. Yeah, he would. And he's very well known for that. Now, that sometimes, but in order to be a servant leader, you really have to be humble, and you have to realize that not everybody, you have to realize that you're not the focus, and some people can't manage that. Okay, they really just can't manage that aspect of it. One of the other major newer theories is this aspect of authentic leadership. Okay, on authentic leaders. So if you look at an authentic leader, what is if you're considered authentic, what would you be considered? Somebody says you're authentic, or an item is authentic. It's the real, right? It's the real deal. Okay. How do you think that manages in a person? If you ask that if a person is considered to be the real deal, what would you put into that to consider? What makes a person considered to be real? Okay, they know themselves, absolutely. Going back to what we talked about the other day, self-awareness, right? You've got to be self-aware. You've got to know what you're actually, where you're at. Okay? What else? How about this aspect of purpose? A person's authentic. Do they seem to have a purpose? Yeah, they do, right? They have a way of doing things, okay? I really like the way this kind of ties into here, okay? In this particular, again, this is another diagram out of the book, but it's an extremely good one, okay? The top three things of an authentic leader, okay, is you have passion, okay? An authentic leader really has passion. They're passionate about what they're doing, okay? And they're pursuing that purpose with that passion, okay? They're also practicing solid values while they're doing that. Okay, and then the third cornerstone of it down at the back is demonstrates self-discipline. Okay? Why do you think that's important as an authentic leader? To be self-disciplined. Are you likely to follow a leader who loses their temper a whole lot? Okay. I mean, granted, everybody's human. It's going to happen occasionally. But if that's their normal mode of operation, do you think you're likely to follow them? Are you going to give them their all if you're really worried about, walking on eggshells and not figuring out what's going to happen next? Okay, probably not. I'm going to hazard a guess. You're probably not going to like that. You're not going to give it your all. Okay, from an authentic leadership. The other aspects of it, which are kind of the dotted lines to this, is where you're actually connecting with others and leading with your heart as well as your head. Okay, so we'll take this latter part of it. When you're talking about somebody leading with their heart, what is it considered? Okay, love is one term. What else? Passion. Well, it kind of goes hand. It does go hand in hand with the passion aspect of it. But it's feeling, right? You're leading with some empathy or feeling. Okay, you're actually putting yourself. You're thinking about how your actions are going to impact somebody else. Okay, so that aspect of leading, with the heart as well as your mind. You see, you're balancing those two things out. Balance out. Okay, I've got to add some emotion into this situation. How does my reaction going to impact somebody else? Okay. The last, which allows you really to connect with somebody, right? It's how you connect with people. It's not through the calculations, right? You're not really thinking about calculations. It's about how you feel. Okay. So authentic leadership, that theory of understanding where it actually impacts somebody else. It really starts to put yourself again where the focus of where you're coming from. Okay, so this other aspect now that we get into here is interactive leadership. Interactive leadership is basically, it's kind of, I look at it as a kind of an extension of an authentic leader, where you're kind of shifting the scales a little bit more towards that feeling and emotion, okay? Whereas the authentic leader will keep all those other factors in check. The interactive leader really shifts that focus from the other, in the previous diagram, it shifts the focus to leading with the heart and the head, okay, as far as the interaction leadership, because it focuses, it's a style where you really are focusing on your interactions with people, okay, as opposed to looking at, say, numbers and those types of things and keeping that purpose going. It's a little bit different, but you're really looking at the focus is on everybody else. So the next aspect, the thing we're going to look at is, what do you think makes a good leader? What are some things that you would think would make a good leader?
Communication.
Okay, communication. Okay, self-confidence. Honesty. What else? What's that? Trustworthiness? Yeah, it kind of goes with, lump that in with. Think, let's take a look at, moving back to some of the commonalities of things that, what are some things you think would be in common between Hitler and Martin Luther King? Well spoken, right? Okay, what else? How about high energy? Okay. Have you ever looked at this, the way those two individuals give speeches? They're very much, they have that sense of passion, okay? High energy. So, when you're looking at high, they really get into that aspect of it. You can feel that emotion when they're actually giving a speech from a leadership perspective. Okay? How about sociable? You think Hitler was sociable? What do you think about? Was he sociable? I'm going to say absolutely sociable. Okay? If you're looking at and the reason why a lot, again, because they're so drastically different motivations behind them. When you boil down these two individuals as leaders, okay, they demonstrate a lot of things in common. Okay? Sociable is one of those things. In other words, sometimes you call it marketing working the crowd, right? Okay, you know how to get your message across. You interact with people very well. Okay, both of those demonstrated that. Regardless, you take out the politics aside. You look at just the leadership aspects of it. They were both highly social individuals. Okay, that's what makes them successful, because they can relate to people. They can get that opinion going. They know what's going on. Okay. What's that? Determination, right? Along that same line, dedication to vision. So when you're looking at this dedication, these two aspects, determined, okay, determination, okay, and dedication to the vision. In other words, they know where they wanted to be. One of them was probably not a very good place to be, okay? from an ethical standpoint, but that's a different class, okay? But he knew the path he wanted to be on, okay? Same as Martin Luther King. He knew what he wanted to see. He knew where he was going, okay? He was dedicated to that vision. It was definitely determined to get there, okay? You know, where you look at these aspects of being, they wanted to be in the positions they were in, okay? So some of that kind of gets them to be, now, can a manager have those? Those traits, yeah. They can, right? But that's kind of where you get into that crossover. Okay? Can you have a manager and not have those traits? Sure you can. Absolutely. These are what did where you transition into that, you know, if you want to look at it as a leader manager, okay? That's one of those terms where these are leadership traits where they transition from that being effective aspect to being motivational, to being that aspect of vision, to understand where you're going, okay? These are those aspects of where you want of a leader, okay? Which takes a person further than you can as a manager, okay? Now you can be good at both, okay? That's not, but typically you're not usually it doesn't work the other way around, okay? You don't usually have, and you will have leaders that are only good as leaders, okay? They're not good managers, okay? They're not effective managers. Or they may be effective managers, but they're not going to be those ones who are dedicated to vision, right? They can get the job done, okay? There's a reason now in most major companies, you have a CEO, a CFO, and a COO, right? Okay? So you have a chief executive officer, chief operating officer, and a chief financial officer. Why do we have those splits? Why do you think there's a distinction there? Because this is new in the last probably 20 years, is that type of structure. CFO has been around for a long time, okay? But used to be the CFO and a CEO, okay? So why do you think they broke that down into a COO? Okay. Not bad, but I would challenge probably the CFO may not have that quite that type of. It really relates back to here. The CFO probably is not going to have quite that type of interaction with those.
Right. Financial interaction, will have the personal interaction.
Right.
And the COO will have operational interaction. So it's just like, I guess, specialize in that field more than just like the CEO.
Yeah, and from the way we look at it, very close. I mean, very close to it. The way you look at it is the CEO is your leader. Okay? Your COO, your CFO, probably more manager. Okay? They're going to be more about being effective. Okay? They're going to be learning more about process and a little less about vision. Okay? So what they, as an operational structure over the last 20 years, they figured out that realistically the CEO needs the person who's to be out front, right? Who is the person you're going to see in front of the press when they want to talk about the company? It's the CEO, right? Okay. So that aspect of being a leader and being that person out front, CEOs typically now are much more leader driven. Okay. What they do is they hire two guys that are probably more on the manager scale. Okay. Probably not, they can still be good leaders, but they're probably a little bit more management focused, okay, to be able to get the job done and become effective, okay? They kind of divided out those roles over the last 20 years because realizing that a leader needs to be the face of the company, okay? When you think of Apple, who do you think of? Yeah, I can't remember. Now it's the CEO. I can't. Tim Cook, I think. Yeah, Tim Cook. Okay, or Steve Jobs before that. Okay, but typically you think of those people out front. They have a COO. Do you ever hear the COO? Okay, no, because the face of the company is the CEO. Okay, that person that's out front. No different than any of those other tech companies now. When you're, the ones who, Steve Zuckerberg, who got, those guys that called the Congress, those are the guys that are the CEOs, okay? They're not running necessarily the day-to-day operations. They're not overseeing that management component. Their job is to speak for the company, okay? And understand how to lead that company forward. And then you get these kind of guys that are kind of good at both, that you kind of put into those. But I would say the challenge is probably most CEOs these days are a lot more leader and a lot less manager. Okay, they leave the management to those guys that are beneath them, both the CFO and the CEO, because structurally it works better that way. And also the demands on the CEO to be outward, to be visible, which is one of those things that you can tell that Zuckerberg, the creator of Facebook, he doesn't like that role. He has to. He's kind of stuck with that role, but he doesn't. He's probably a little less in this aspect, right? I would consider him not to be quite so sociable. Okay, driven, yes. His communication style is probably not the best. Okay, obviously because he's continually having issues with the press. Okay, but he does have some of these characteristics like dedicated to the vision. Obviously, determination, but he's kind of walks that middle as opposed to Tim Cook or Steve Jobs. Those guys here, Bill Gates, those guys all fit into this category really, really well. Okay, so the last part of this is we've got this aspect of the leadership, of this aspect called a leadership grid. Okay? It's just another way of looking at, it's another leadership type of theory. It's broken down by skill sets. Okay? So what they did is several researchers came up with this particular model, okay, based on kind of actions that you're actually doing, okay, where they did some, and they basically split it down into people and production, and basically surveyed a whole bunch of managers in that aspect of it, and basically kind of asked them to rank, kind of like the survey we did. In this case, it's basically rank things on 1 to 10, okay? When they compiled all those, they figured out that characteristics that were people who actually scored in the higher category, like 9 or above each of these categories, demonstrated this aspect of team management. They were concerned for production, they were concerned for people, okay? So they ranked both of those characteristics very high, okay? Now, if they were focused pretty low on production and high on people, I kind of like this term, country club management, okay? When you think of country clubs, what do you think? Golf, I mean, yeah, but what else? Right, comfortable, friendly, they make you feel welcome, right? Well, that's kind of what they said with that particular leadership style. Country club managers want to make you feel well, okay? They want to make you feel welcome. They're comfortable. You're friendly, okay? But are they super effective, do you think? Maybe it make you feel people comfortable, but can they push to get that job done? Probably not, okay? Now we'll go to the other side of it. Okay, the opposite total of that is authority compliance, okay? I've worked with a few of these guys, okay? Which is basically where you've got very high on production, not so caring about the people, right? Those are people where you're looking at those, can they get the job done? Yeah, they can get the job done, okay? They're probably really effective at that. But what do you think about that particular leadership style in the long term? Is that sustainable? No, it's not. Okay, plenty of studies actually shown that it really that it's not sustainable. If you're ranking in this bottom quarter over here, you're just not set up to be management. Really, is what they're saying. Impoverished management, which basically means you can't do your job. Okay, because that's low on the people scale, low on productivity. Okay, realistically, when you score that way, it's not going to be very good for you in management for a very long time. And those are people where I have seen those people, and I've encouraged them to take a very senior line position and get out of management because they just aren't very effective at all. But I have seen people along those lines. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about here is situational leadership. And the way you look at situational leadership is, just like the term says, it's how you act and treat people is dependent upon the situation. Okay? So, and you pass through these 4 styles, basically, okay? On where you get into this bottom corner over here where you're kind of delegating, which means you're basically in the low task area, okay, as well as the low relationship area, okay? So if you think of somebody who just keeps delegating to you, okay, I've had managers who operate in that their entire life, okay? They just keep delegating to you, not really caring about what the task is or what the task needs, okay? It's just a flat line, okay? Now, as you move up there, those decisions that end up where those situations, you may end up having to need a participation type of leadership style, okay? And participation style is one of those where, or participating aspect of this, is decisions where you want to include people's input, okay? It may be, we need to get this project done and completed, okay? So what are we going to need to do? So you get that participation aspect of this, okay? Moving over to the other side, you would be the opposite of participating is you're selling something, okay? You may be having to sell the way your process is doing. And then down on the bottom is you're basically telling, okay, which is more autocratic and not authoritative. Now, the thing that these guys came up with is if you're in basically the left-hand side of that column, and that's where you, in this particular model, if you score it in those columns, you're really not a leader. You're a follower, okay? So if you're in the participating or delegating type of aspect, you're really follower directed, okay? Whereas on the other side, you're leader directed, which is obviously the selling and telling, right? Because it's really the active part of the leadership is what you're doing in those cases. This is another theory that I probably use quite extensively because it depends on the situation, okay? There are some times where things need to be delegated, okay? The situation may be, where in my case, in my world, it would be an event, okay? And I would delegate out the aspects of that event to the various management team that I have, okay? You're responsible for this area, you're responsible for this area, this needs to be done by this time, okay? That's delegating, okay? That's kind of what it requires. Now, one of those situations where okay, we've got this thing we're doing that's out of the norm. How are we going to get this job done? So there I'm participating, right? I'm getting input from the people who work with me. Now, there are times also where I've had to sell this, okay? In my world, sometimes the client wins, okay? And so if the client wins on something that's really, really tough to do, so what do you think I'm gonna have to do to my team? I'm gonna have to sell them on it, right? That we can do this. I'm gonna have to really actually turn around and sell them that, okay, this is something we can do. We can get this going, okay? But this is what's gonna have to happen. And then of course, in the crisis mode, I can tell you almost every leader reverts to the telling mode, okay? When you reach into a crisis situation, there's not a lot of negotiation, there's not a lot of room for selling. This is what needs to happen, this is what needs to happen now, okay? But by varying this and following this kind of situational leadership, you can actually get people really to buy into it. Okay. When I shifted into a telling mode, okay, my staff knew and reacted to that because that's not something I normally do. But that means if I'm into that, they reacted in the same sense of urgency. Okay. Because as I flowed through these aspects of them, okay, typically I participated a lot in delegating. Okay. But it just depended on this. But at the same time, if we're in the middle of an event and something's going wrong, things need to happen. They need to happen quickly. Okay, then I would revert to the telling. Okay, and typically, if you're effectively leading, your team is going to react to that. They're going to react to you as the individual. Okay, and that's really what kind of keyed in this aspect of situational leadership, because it truly is about the situation. Okay, and if you're varying it by that, usually if you're using this particular style effectively, your team will react to you in the same way. Okay. All right, guys. I think we'll end up there. We'll pick up on Friday. We got a couple, one or two more styles I want to go over, and then we're going to go. We're going back to take a little step back and take a look at the Big Five. And the Briggs-Myers assessment. We're not doing a Briggs-Myers assessment because it's a pretty extensive one, but we will be doing the Big Five one, okay, because that we can get done in class. So take a look at that and see how this all ties together. All right, we'll see everybody Friday.
Oh, yeah.